Welcome back to Super English Talks. I'm Sarah, and I'm so glad you've joined me today for a really important conversation about a topic that affects almost all of us at some point: how to handle exam stress. When a mistake happens, our first reaction is often emotional. Maybe you feel embarrassed, frustrated, or even angry at yourself. This emotional wave can make it hard to That's why it's useful to give yourself a small buffer before jumping into analysis. For example,
Okay.
if you fail a test, don't immediately grab your notebook and start dissecting your errors while you're still upset. Take a short walk, listen to calming music, or simply breathe deeply for a few minutes. Once the initial wave of emotion settles, your brain will be in a better place to think logically about what happened. Why is this important? Because emotional thinking often leads to either overreaction or avoidance. Overreaction might sound like, I can't believe I messed up. I'm never going to be good at this. Avoidance might sound like, I don't even want to look at that test again. Both responses rob you of the chance to learn. Logical reflection, on the other hand, allows you to separate the mistake from your identity. You start seeing it as a single event, not a definition of who you are. Now, once you're ready for logical reflection, it's helpful to break it down into 3 steps. 1. Identify the trigger. What caused the mistake? Was it lack of preparation? A misunderstanding? Rushing. 2. Analyze the process. At what point did things start to go wrong? Was there a decision or action that set the chain of events in motion? 3. Create an action plan. What's one concrete thing you can do differently next time? Let's make this real with an example. Imagine you're learning English and you keep making the same grammar mistake using he go instead of he goes. The trigger might be that you're thinking too quickly when speaking. The process might be that you skip the S because you're focused on the rest of the sentence. The action plan could be to slow down slightly and emphasize the verb ending when you practice speaking. This is a small example, but the same method works for bigger mistakes too. Another thing I want to talk about is the role of feedback. Sometimes we can't see our own mistakes clearly because we're too close to them. This is where feedback becomes invaluable. Feedback from teachers, colleagues, or friends can help you spot patterns you might not notice on your own. The trick is to treat feedback as data, not as a personal attack. Imagine you're a scientist gathering information. The goal isn't to defend yourself. It's to understand the variables at play so you can improve the result. Of course, not all feedback is equally useful. Constructive feedback points to specific things you can change, while unhelpful feedback is vague or purely critical. If someone just says, "That was bad," without explaining why, it doesn't help you grow. In those cases, it's okay too. Ask clarifying questions like, What exactly didn't work? Can you give me an example? Now, some people avoid feedback because they fear judgment. But here's the truth. Avoiding feedback doesn't protect you, it just slows your growth. Think of it like a GPS. If you take a wrong turn, your GPS doesn't yell at you or say you're a bad driver. It simply recalculates and shows you a better route. That's how feedback works when you approach it with the right mindset. Let's shift gears for a moment and talk about forgiveness, especially self-forgiveness. We often talk about forgiving others, but forgiving yourself is just as important. If you constantly replay your mistakes in your head, you're carrying unnecessary weight. That weight can hold you back from trying again. Self-forgiveness doesn't mean ignoring the lesson. It means releasing the emotional burden so you can move forward with a clear mind. One way to practice self-forgiveness is to imagine speaking to yourself the way you would speak to a close friend. If your friend made the same mistake, would you call them a failure? Probably not. You'd encourage them, remind them of their strengths, and help them see a path forward. So why not offer yourself the same kindness? I also want to touch on the idea of celebrating improvement, not just perfection. Let's say you made a big mistake last month that cost your team a project. This month, you handle a similar task, and while it's not flawless, it's a clear improvement. That's worth acknowledging. Too often, we skip over small wins because we're chasing perfection. But small wins are what build momentum. Think of it like climbing a mountain. If you only celebrate when you reach the top, you're missing all the milestones along the way. Every step forward matters. And speaking of mountains, it reminds me of a story about a climber who slipped during a practice climb. It wasn't a life-threatening fall, but it shook his confidence. Instead of quitting, he analyzed what went wrong, his grip technique, and spent weeks practicing just that skill. When he returned to the same route, he climbed it without a hitch. That one slip had become the foundation for his eventual success. The takeaway here is that mistakes can become your greatest teachers if you're willing to engage with them fully emotionally, logically. So let's talk about habit change, because mistakes often aren't just random accidents. They're patterns. And if you don't identify and change the pattern, you're likely to make the same mistake again and again. Here's a simple truth. Habits are like the autopilot of your life. They run in the background, influencing your decisions without you even realizing it. Sometimes these habits are helpful, like brushing your teeth every morning. But other times, they're unhelpful, like procrastinating until the last minute or reacting defensively when someone gives you feedback. The first step in breaking a mistake-causing habit is awareness. You can't change what you don't see. This is why I recommend keeping a mistake journal. Every time you notice yourself making the same type of error, Write it down. Describe what happened, what you were feeling, what you were doing, and what the outcome was. For example, if you keep missing deadlines, you might notice that the pattern always starts with underestimating how long a task will take. That's valuable insight because once you see the root cause, you can start working on a fix like doubling your time estimates or breaking the task into smaller steps. The second step is replacement, not removal. Many people make the mistake of trying to just stop a bad habit without replacing it with something better. Habits work like muscle memory. If you don't give your brain a new pathway, it will default to the old one. Let's say you have the habit of interrupting people during conversations. Instead of just telling yourself, I need to stop interrupting, create a replacement habit. Wait 3 seconds after someone finishes speaking before responding. This gives you a clear action to take instead of the old one. The third step is reinforcement. Habits stick when they're rewarded. That reward could be external, like someone thanking you for letting them finish their thought, or internal, like the satisfaction of seeing a better outcome. The more you notice and appreciate the improvement, the more your brain will want to repeat the new habit.
Now, I want to address something important here, fear of making the same mistake twice. A lot of people live with this anxiety. But here's the thing. Repeating a mistake doesn't mean you failed to learn. It just means the lesson isn't fully absorbed yet. Learning is rarely a straight line. Think of a toddler learning to walk. They fall hundreds of times before they can run. The falling isn't failure, it's practice. Of course, some mistakes have bigger consequences than others. If your mistake hurt someone or caused significant harm, the process might involve not only learning, but also repairing the damage. This is where accountability comes in. Accountability means taking ownership of the outcome and doing what you can to make things right. And here's the interesting part: taking responsibility often builds trust, not destroys it. People respect honesty and humility. If you say, I made a mistake, and here's what I'm doing to fix it, you demonstrate integrity and growth. One of my favorite examples of this comes from a small bakery owner I met during a trip. She accidentally sold a batch of bread that hadn't risen properly, was dense and tough. Instead of ignoring the issue, she called every customer who had bought it, apologized, and offered a fresh loaf for free. Not only did those customers come back, but many of them became loyal fans. Her willingness to own her mistake turned a potential loss into a lasting relationship. Now, let's touch on something that doesn't get talked about enough: when mistakes lead to unexpected opportunities. Sometimes, what feels like a mistake is actually a hidden doorway. For example, a photographer I know once accidentally overexposed a roll of film. Instead of throwing it away, he experimented with editing the images. The result was a dreamy, artistic style that eventually became his signature work. The lesson: don't be so quick to label something as purely bad. Ask yourself, is there any part of this I can use? Is there a creative twist here I hadn't seen before? All right, we've talked about awareness, replacement, reinforcement, accountability, and hidden opportunities. But I also want to give you one final piece of advice that ties it all together. Keep moving forward. Mistakes can be heavy. They can make you want to stop trying altogether. But remember, the only way to truly fail is to quit. Every step you take after a mistake, no matter how small's proof that you're still in the game. Let's start with a story about a young university student named Alina. Alina was studying architecture, and in her second year, she had a huge project to design a community park. She was ambitious. She wanted her design to stand out from all the others. She worked long hours, skipped meals, and spent entire nights adjusting tiny details. But when she presented her project, the panel of professors pointed out a major flaw. The drainage system wouldn't work. In other words, her beautiful park would flood every time it rained. Alina was crushed. She had spent weeks perfecting the aesthetics but ignored the practical requirements. Her first instinct was to throw the project away and forget about it. But after a day of sulking, she decided to talk to her professors and ask them to explain exactly what had gone wrong. They showed her how the water flow should be calculated, how to plan for slopes, and how to integrate the drainage system into the park's design. In the next semester, Alina worked on a new project of riverside walkway. This time, she started with the practical requirements first and then added her artistic vision on top. Her design ended up winning a National Student Award. She later told me that her flooding park mistake was the turning point in her entire career. Without it, she might never have understood the importance of balancing beauty with function. The takeaway: sometimes the mistake you're most embarrassed about becomes the very foundation for your success. You're willing to study it instead of hiding from it. Another example comes from the world of science. You've probably heard of Alexander Fleming, the man who discovered penicillin. But what many people don't know is that his discovery was a mistake. He had left a petri dish of bacteria uncovered, and it got contaminated with mold. Instead of throwing it away, he noticed that the mold was killing the bacteria around it. That accident led to the creation of the world's first antibiotic, saving millions of lives. This story is a powerful reminder that mistakes are not always dead ends. Sometimes they are unexpected beginnings. The real skill is being curious instead of just critical. Let's also talk about a more personal, everyday example, something you might relate to. Imagine you're learning English and you keep using the wrong tense in conversation. Maybe you say, "I go to the store yesterday," instead of, "I went to the store yesterday." Each time, someone corrects you, and you feel a little embarrassed. Now, you could respond to this mistake in two ways. One option is to avoid speaking English out of fear of making that error again. The other option is to lean into the correction. You write the correct sentence down, practice it out loud, and even make a little joke about it to help you remember. Over time, the correct tense becomes second nature, and you've grown as a speaker. The truth is, the only way to get comfortable in a language war, in any skills to make mistakes and learn from them. Perfection is not the entry ticket. The outcome of practice. Asterisk, there's also the story of Akira Kurosawa, one of the most respected film directors in history. Early in his career, he made a movie that was criticized for being too slow and overly complex. Instead of defending it stubbornly, he studied the reviews carefully and analyzed why the pacing didn't work. Storytelling techniques, and those became international classics. He once said, "In a mad world, only the mad are sane," meaning that to grow, you sometimes have to be brave enough to admit you're wrong and start fresh. Story 1. The Mist. Shot that made a champion. Let's step into the world of basketball for a moment. There's a story about a young player named Marcus who dreamed of becoming a professional athlete. In his high school championship game, his team was down by 1 point with just 5 seconds left on the clock. Marcus got the ball, ran toward the hoop, and missed the shot. The buzzer rang, and his team lost. For days, he replayed that moment in his head, but instead of letting it haunt him, Marcus decided to turn it into fuel. He stayed after practice every day, shooting from every angle, under every condition, with teammates trying to block him. Years later, he became known for his ability to make difficult shots under pressure. He would tell young players that, "Miss made me. Without it, I'd still be average." The lesson? The moments that hurt the most often have the power to shape the skills you'll be most proud of. Asterisk. Story 2. The business that failed its way to success. Let's look at the business world. Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, started her career selling fax machines door-to-door. She was rejected almost every single day. She also had an early idea for a product that completely failed. Nobody bought it. Most people would have given up, but she saw those failures as training sessions for persistence. When she eventually came up with the idea for Spanx, she had already learned how to handle rejection, how to pitch her ideas, and how to listen to customer feedback. That's why she was ready when her big idea came along. She often says that her father would ask her at dinner, "What did you fail at this week?" and then celebrate the answer. The point was simple. Failure meant you were trying. Asterisk story 3, the wrong turn. That saved a life. Not all mistakes are career-related. Some are deeply personal. A mountaineer named Ravi once told me about a climbing trip in the Himalayas. He took a wrong turn on the mountain path and ended up far from the group. At first, he panicked, but then he noticed something unusual. In the distance, he saw a lone climber lying on the ground. That person had fallen and was injured. Ravi called for help and stayed with the climber until rescuers arrived. Later, he thought about how his mistake had led him to save someone's life. Sometimes, life's detours reveal a purpose you didn't expect. Asterisk story 4. The actor who couldn't remember his lines in the early days of his career. An actor named Tom kept forgetting his lines during live performances. It was so bad that he started keeping little notes hidden in the set. But over time, this embarrassment forced him to develop razor-sharp improvisation skills. Those skills later made him famous for quick-witted roles and brilliant unscripted moments on stage and screen. His forgetting wasn't a weakness. It was the training ground for a new strength. Asterisk Story 5. The student who mispronounced everything. Finally, let's circle back to language learning. A student named May moved to London and struggled with English pronunciation. She once asked for sheet paper in class, but pronounced it so badly that the whole room burst out laughing. She wanted to quit speaking English altogether, but instead of hiding, she asked her teacher to correct her every single time she made a mistake. She started recording herself speaking and comparing it to native speakers. Today, May teaches English pronunciation online to thousands of learners. The mistake that embarrassed her became the reason she's now an expert in that exact skill.
Each of these stories reminds us that mistakes are not the end. They're the classroom where we learn the lessons that make us unstoppable. You know? One of the hardest parts about making a mistake is not the mistake itself. It's what happens after. It's the silence in your own head when you replay the moment over and over. It's the heaviness in your chest when you think, I should have known better. It's that sudden wave of shame or embarrassment that makes you want to hide. But here's the truth: mistakes are loud in the beginning and quiet later. They shout at first, demanding your attention. They scream, look what you did wrong. But if you sit with them long enough, they soften. They become whispers, saying, here's what you can learn. The problem is, most of us don't wait for the whisper. We run from the noise. We distract ourselves. We bury the feeling. And when we do that, we also bury the lesson. So let me walk you through something that works, something I call the pause. Whenever you make a mistake, whether it's forgetting an important deadline, saying the wrong thing in a conversation, or making a poor decision, you take a pause. You literally stop everything, take a deep breath, and sit still. It sounds simple, but in that pause, you create space between what happened and what you do next. This is important because your first reaction after a mistake is almost never your best reaction. If you respond while you're angry, ashamed, or panicking, you'll usually make things worse. But if you pause even for just a few minutes, you give your mind a chance to move from emotion to logic. After the pause comes the second step, the honest look. This is when you gently ask yourself, what exactly happened? And what part of it was within my control? This step matters because sometimes we blame ourselves for things we couldn't control. And other times, we ignore the part we could have controlled. An honest look helps you see the difference. Now, here's the part that scares people: owning it. Owning your mistake means you stop trying to explain it away or blame someone else. It means you say, yes, I did this, and I'm going to make it right. It's scary because we think admitting fault will make people lose respect for us. But you know what actually happens? When you own your mistake, people trust you more. They see you as someone who's real, responsible, and strong enough to face the truth. The fourth step is repair. Sometimes repair means apologizing. Sometimes it means fixing the problem. And sometimes it means changing your behavior so it doesn't happen again. Repair is not about erasing the mistake. It's about showing you've learned from it. And finally, the most overlooked step, release. Release means you let it go. You stop replaying it in your head like an old movie. You stop using it as evidence against yourself. Because if you keep holding on to it, it will weigh you down in every future decision. When you can pause, take an honest look, own it, repair and release. You stop being afraid of mistakes. You start to see them for what they are, moments of growth disguised as setbacks. And here's the funny thing. Once you stop fearing mistakes, you actually make fewer of them. Not because you've suddenly become perfect, but because you make decisions from a place of calm confidence instead of fear. You know, listeners, I get messages from students all the time saying things like, Sarah, I messed up my last exam and I can't stop thinking about it. I feel like a failure. And I want to start by saying something very important. You are not your mistakes. One message I got last week was from a student named Emily. She wrote, I studied really hard, but I froze during the math exam. I left half of it blank. I feel like all my effort was wasted. First of all, thank you for being brave enough to share this. That alone is a huge step. Here's the thing. Freezing during an exam happens to thousands of students every year, even the ones who seem confident. Your effort was not wasted because every hour you spent studying strengthened your understanding. Even if it didn't show on that exam. No, here's how I would guide Emily through this. First, breathe. Literally, stop thinking about the exam for a moment and just take a deep, slow breath in and out. Do that a few times. It's amazing how something so simple can start to calm your racing mind. Next, we look at the facts. What exactly happened on that exam? You froze. Yes, but why? Was it lack of practice? Not understanding certain types of problems? Or just the pressure of the moment? Pinpointing the cause gives you the power to prevent it next time. And then we make a plan. Maybe Emily can try practice tests under timed conditions to simulate exam pressure. Maybe she can work on deep breathing techniques or visualization exercises before the exam. The key is turning the experience into a learning moment, not a wall to beat yourself against. Another listener, Ahmed, shared a different story. He said, Sarah, I feel fine during exams, but the stress hits me afterward. Keep replaying every question and worrying about whether I answered correctly. Asterisk. Ah. Post-exam stress is so common. Amit, what you're experiencing is very natural. But here's a trick I teach. Schedule a worry window. For example, allow yourself 15 minutes to reflect on the exam. Write down your thoughts, questions, and feelings. Then, after that 15 minutes, close your notebook and shift your focus to something else. You might ask, Sarah, won't ignoring it make me careless for the next exam? Not at all. The goal isn't to ignore lessons learned, dates to stop. Obsessive rumination that steals your peace. Reflection is constructive. Overthinking is destructive. Now, let's talk about another common story I hear students who struggle with comparison stress. Emma wrote, Sarah, everyone in my class seems to get perfect scores, and I'm just average. I feel like I'll never measure up. Emma, this is so relatable. It's easy to look at others and feel inadequate. But the truth is, everyone has their own pace and path. Comparing yourself to others is like comparing apples and oranges. Okay. Your focus should be on your growth, what you are learning, and how you are improving. A helpful exercise is journaling your progress. Each week, write down 3 things you did better than last week. Maybe you managed your study time more effectively. Maybe you understood a concept you struggled with before. Seeing tangible improvement helps shift your mindset from I'm not enough to I'm growing. And here's another one I love listener's story from Ravi. He said, Sarah, I panic during exams and forget everything. Even when I know the material. It's humiliating. Ravi, you're not alone. This is called test anxiety, and it's a physiological response, not a reflection of your intelligence. Your body is reacting as if you're in danger, even though you're just sitting at a desk. The solution: train your mind and body to stay calm. Practice breathing exercises, mindfulness, and even positive self-talk. Tell yourself, I've prepared. I can do this, and my best is enough. Here's a technique I suggest to all my listeners: the mental rehearsal. Close your eyes and imagine walking into the exam room calmly. Visualize yourself reading the questions, understanding them, and confidently writing answers. Do this a few times before the exam. Your brain starts to associate exams with calm, not panic, and you know what's powerful? Sharing your experiences. When Emily, Ahmed, Emma, and Ravi opened up about their struggles, they realized they weren't alone. That sense of community reduces stress dramatically. Find a friend, classmate, or family member you can talk to. It doesn't have to be about every detail. Just knowing someone understands is a huge relief. Now, let's switch gears a bit and talk about small daily habits that build resilience against exam stress. One listener, Hannah, shared her strategy. She starts each day with a short walk and a glass of water, followed by 5 minutes of deep breathing. She told me, Sarah, it doesn't solve everything, but I feel more centered going into the day. You're demonstrating an important principle. Stress management isn't a single event, it's a lifestyle. Good sleep, balanced nutrition, hydration, movement, and mindfulness are all building blocks. Combine them with smart study strategies, and you create a buffer that keeps stress from overwhelming you. And remember, listeners, it's okay to have setbacks. No one handles stress perfectly all the time. The goal isn't perfection, it's progress. When you stumble, pause, reflect, learn, and move forward. Before we finish today, I want to leave you with a challenge. This week, pick one listener strategy. We've discussed maybe deep breathing, journaling your progress, or mental rehearsal, and commit to practicing it every day. Track your experience and notice the difference in how you handle study sessions and exams. Remember, exam stress is temporary. Your growth and learning last a lifetime. Treat exams as opportunities to learn about the subject, yes, but also about yourself, how you respond under pressure, how you plan, how you recover, and that, dear listeners, is a lesson that no test score can ever measure.
Recognizing the signs of exam stress, the first step to managing stress is recognizing when it's becoming a problem. There are physical, behavioral, and mental or emotional signs to watch out for. Physical signs include things like a racing heart, tense muscles, headaches, sweating, or stomach problems. Behavioral signs might be fidgeting, biting your nails, or even turning to unhealthy coping mechanisms, like overeating or smoking. Mental and emotional signs are often the most difficult. We're talking about difficulty concentrating, racing thoughts, going blank during an exam, and that overwhelming feeling of fear or dread. It's almost like your brain freezes up and says, "Nope, I'm out." These reactions can stem from a variety of factors, including lifestyle issues like not getting enough sleep or eating right, or feeling unprepared because you don't have the right study techniques. Many people assume that more study time equals less stress, but it's not just about how much you study, but how you study. Cramming all night might feel productive, but it's one of the worst things you can do. You're basically overloading your brain, making it harder to retain and recall information. Effective pre-exam preparation. So, what does effective preparation actually look like? 1. Understand what's expected. Consult your syllabus, talk to your teachers, and clarify any confusion. It's like having a roadmap instead of wandering around in the dark. Point 2. Use context-dependent memory. Our brains are wired to remember things better when we are in a similar environment and state of mind as when we first learn the information. If your exam will be in a quiet room, try to mimic those conditions when you study. This goes for your emotional state too. If you're used to studying with a cup of coffee, your brain might actually perform better on test day if you have a Similar amount of caffeine. 3. Take effective notes. Taking good notes isn't just about recording information. It's about actively engaging with the material. The process of writing things down helps solidify them in your memory, making it easier to recall information later on. 4. Manage your time with spaced repetition instead of cramming everything into one massive study session. Try breaking your study time into smaller chunks spread out over several days or weeks. This gives your brain time to process and absorb the information. 5. Prioritize. Physical well-being, taking care of yourself physically, is just as important as preparing mentally. Stay hydrated by drinking plenty of water and focus on foods that provide sustained energy like lean proteins, complex carbohydrates, fruits, and vegetables. Even short bursts of physical activity can make a world of difference as it releases mood-boosting endorphins. And a good night's sleep is non-negotiable. Stress management techniques. 7. With the best preparation. You might still feel pressure in the exam room. Here are some indominant stress-busting techniques to stay calm and focused. 1. Chewing gum. It sounds strange, but research has shown that the repetitive motion of chewing, gum can have a calming effect too. Don't be afraid to ask for clarification. If you don't understand an instruction, raise your hand and ask. It's better to take a few seconds to clarify than to spend the rest of the exam second-guessing yourself. 3. Use deep breathing. This is a classic for a reason. It helps to slow your heart rate, regulate your breathing, and calm those racing thoughts. Try the 4-7-8 technique. Inhale slowly through your nose for a count of 4. Hold your breath for a count of 7. And then exhale slowly through your mouth for a count of 8. 4. Try progressive muscle relaxation. This technique involves tensing and releasing different muscle groups to become more aware of tension and consciously release it. 5. Take a break. If you're feeling overwhelmed, a quick break can help you refocus and come back to the exam with fresh eyes. Get up, stretch, or get some water. 6. Focus on your senses when your mind is racing. Try to ground yourself in the present moment by focusing on what you can see, hear, feel, and smell. It's like a mini meditation in the middle of the exam. Coping. With post-exam stress, the stress doesn't always end when the exam does. Here's how to deal with that lingering anxiety and move forward gracefully. 1. Resist the urge to dwell once the exam is over. There's nothing you can do to change your answers, except that you did your best and shift your focus to something else. 2. Reward yourself. Celebrate getting through the experience. Watch a movie, read a book, or hang out with friends. Do something you enjoy to clear your mind and relax. 3. Reframe your perspective. Instead of seeing the exam as a pass-or-fail event, view it as a learning opportunity. Identify your strengths and weaknesses to improve your study strategies for next time. Remember, your worth as a student and as a person is not defined by your exam performance. Finally, remember that you are not alone in this. Everyone experiences stress, and there are resources available to help you cope. Reaching out for help is a sign of strength, not weakness. Talk to someone you trust, a friend, family member, teacher, or counselor. Many schools offer counseling services specifically for students dealing with exam stress. So don't be afraid to take advantage of those resources. I've really enjoyed this conversation with you. Okay. And I hope our listeners will as well. There's no magic bullet when it comes to managing exam stress. It's about finding what works for you and developing a toolkit of strategies that you can draw on when the pressure is on. So, here's a challenge for you, dear listener. Based on everything we've discussed today, what one strategy are you going to try implementing for your next exam? Think about it. Pick one thing that resonated with you and commit to putting it into action because knowledge is only powerful when it's applied, right? And that's what we're all about here at Super English Talks. Empowering you with knowledge and the tools to use it in your life. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay stress-free.